and want to go ahead and kick it off and just say welcome. Welcome to our students and our community members and our alums. We are going to talk about leveraging VR today. And my name is Carrie Ross, and I work with the Alumni Development Team just for the School of Business. We are so thrilled to have Pat Sweeney here. He is our Executive Director for the Allegacy Center for Leadership and Character. And also John Montana, who is our Executive Director for Online Strategy and Instructional Technology and Innovation. So thanks, guys, so much for giving up your time and being here and teaching us something great today.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome, everybody. We're going to start this journey, and John and I are going to just go back and forth between it here and really kind of share how the School of Business is thinking about leveraging AI and VR in leader development. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll be ready to start this journey. John, do you want to go ahead and kick off and kind of talk to us about the strategy for the whole school and the way forward as far as leveraging AI and VR?
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you. I'm going to, as Pat said, just take a couple of minutes here to sort of set the stage a little bit. So Carrie introduced me and shared my title. It's a long title, but I think the way I really like to think about it is the role that I play is to help our school think innovatively about the way that we use technology, whether it's administratively or with regard to teaching and learning and research. And so a lot of what you're going to hear us share, and Pat and I, this is a perfect example. The work that I'm partnering with Pat on in the Allegacy Center is a collaboration. And so much of this requires different parts and pieces, right? And different ideas and different people coming together to explore this work. I like to speak about it with colleagues and community members and students as it relates to like technology enhanced education. And so one of the first things that we did in my area a year ago was really sketch out a framework, right? Keeping in line with what the university has done over the last couple of years, and obviously adapted here in the School of Business to make sure that this work aligns with appropriate places of investment for the institution. The way that I like to think about how we contribute in this work is contributing to what is a very dynamic business education, right? So in doing so, anything that we're doing should be personal in nature. It should contribute to flexibility or flexible experiences, but most importantly, it should be immersive, right? And immersive is a broad definition, a broad term. We can use it in a lot of different ways, and we are certainly doing that. But that's sort of the higher level view. And I'm going to, in a moment here, I'll connect some dots a little bit more closely with some of those university and School of Business framework elements. But to continue to describe a little bit about the work we're doing, Pat, if you wanted to just tab forward one, that'd be great. So one example of work that we're doing, in addition to what we're going to talk with you about today, which is AI and VR and leader development, I've partnered with colleagues in the MSM program, our Master of Science and Management program, and we have been leveraging virtual reality in partnership with Lowe's Foods and Smurfit Westrock Packaging in our retail learning labs. So there are a whole bunch of folks who've come together to think about how we can leverage virtual reality and 3D experiences to really teach students about the retail merchandising process. That program has had a case study for a number of years in partnership with Lowe's Foods in the retail learning labs. It was a case study that's been taught in the program, usually during the summer months, and then expanded on in the fall. And so this gave us a foundation or an idea to then take the technology and go a little further. And if you're interested in seeing assets related to that experience, I'm happy to share those with you post today. But it's been a really cool collaboration with a couple of industry partners, with one of our labs, retail learning labs here, and an actual academic program. And that work is expanding and will continue into this fall semester, started in the summer. By the time we're done with leveraging those assets that we've created, which is essentially a 360-degree tour experience, which goes along with the case study, more than 100 students will have engaged with that by the time we hit the end of the fall, which will have almost exceeded all touch points we had with virtual reality or extended reality last year in the academic year alone. So really excited about that work. Pat, if you wanted to tab forward one, that'd be great. We've also invested in faculty and staff professional development. So our Center for Teaching and Learning, led by Dr. Betsy Berry here at the university, I think has been an inspiration for many of us. She's done incredible work in supporting our faculty through a variety of different initiatives to help them get their brains wrapped around the role of AI and generative AI in the teaching and learning process. We wanted to dovetail on that or build on that. And so I partnered with Shannon McKean in our Center for Analytics Impact, and we created an eight sessions learning series, which we kicked off in June and we'll conclude here in October, which we refer to as Building AI Fluency. And it was all really about trying to help colleagues build a foundation and begin to find those places and spaces that they could begin leveraging the technology, but also understanding the technology, because as I'm sure many of you understand and know, it's very, there are a lot of layers to it, right? And so as a learning institution, we also need to be thinking about ethical use of and responsible use of the technology and how its impacts on the teaching and learning process, students understanding it. So we will probably take that learning series and do a version 2.0 in the spring based on the feedback that we've received. All right, Pat, you can go ahead and tab forward one more. We've also partnered with our finance area, so our finance discipline. In the spring, we completed our first mergers and acquisitions case experience in virtual reality. It was a multi-party negotiation. If you're following the news, almost a year ago, we opened our virtual doors to the digital twin or the digital replication of Farrell Hall. And we actually use that digital space for students to actually complete negotiations in that environment. And we are taking that experience and the goal for that experience is to grow it into a fully fledged simulation that students can engage in as a single player, right? As one user practicing at home in their dorm room, going through that experience, as well as a real-time multi-student experience that they can do real time. And we have identified a partner, a company called Sim Insights, to help us with that experience. Now, to the topic of the day, which is AI and VR and leader development, the really neat thing about the role that AI is playing is it's reducing barriers, it's reducing costs, it's reducing timelines to our ability to create this content that you typically would have had to have a full game development team for. And so for an educational institution, this is a really exciting time for that. And then finally, program design and delivery. So this is kind of a bucket around how we're using AI in more of an administrative or content creation. And Pat's going to talk more about this some. But we're leveraging this. We've got faculty who have avatars of themselves. They're creating asynchronous materials, leveraging AI to do that. So we're testing it in some of those places and spaces as well. And we're also starting to think about, and we've tested some uses of AI around assessment, right? Actually providing and helping us expedite qualitative feedback processes and qualitative feedback loops for students as well. So the reason I chose sort of those 4 buckets is just to give you a sense at a 30,000-foot view of what this means when we talk about technology-enhanced education in the School of Business and where we're playing, more or less. We just completed our first year's worth of work in this space. And so heading into year 2 of like a 5-year mapped timeline of how we go from sort of pilot and proof of concept to some things that really begin to anchor into our School of Business daily lives. So next slide, Pat. Okay. So I mentioned in my early comments that, of course, none of this really would matter unless we were anchoring it to what we are trying to achieve and pursue as an institution and as a School of Business. So first and foremost, thematic goal 1, community of learning. This hits clearly to this area, right? So if you read that and you're familiar with the framework, values grounded, cutting edge business education. So we, I guess, play that cutting edge role in that language, right? We're trying to really encourage and nurture the boundaries a little bit about what teaching and learning could look like and how we can leverage those things to ensure a really impactful experience. But we're also a learning organization, right? So until about 18 months ago, a year ago, we weren't really building capacities in a lot of these spaces. We're building those capacities now, either from internal resource development or identifying and building appropriate partnerships externally to help us execute on this work. We are taking our own medicine, right? We are learning as we go as well. So we anchor really nicely to that thematic goal number one. Next one, Pat. And then community of engaged partnerships. And so the one we're talking about today is the area that I sit in, working with our Allegacy Center for Leadership and Character, and then a local business here, Looking Glass XR, who has been working with a number of local educational institutions on getting their feet underneath them as it relates to how extended reality contributes to the educational process. It's not the only vendor we're working with. There are 3 key vendors that have contributed to this. Looking Glass XR is one, Victory XR is another, and then Sim Insights, who I mentioned earlier on a different project, is another. But what's really exciting, and we see extension here, is that the example I gave you around our retail merchandising and marketing experience is we have not only institutional partnership, but we have industry partnership in pursuing that activity. And I think these are great examples of how we can bring like-minded, similarly minded individuals together to execute on a mission, even if we do not have all those individual capacities represented inside this school. And that I think speaks just volumes to the way that we like to think about things and pursue things here at Wake Forest. But so I just wanted to make sure we spoke briefly on how we anchor to the framework for the institution and the School of Business. So VR and AI, someone asked me, Norma Montague, who's our Senior Associate Dean of Academic Programs, who I report to, we were having a conversation a year ago this coming December, and we were in our early days, and she said, okay, which one's bigger, VR and AI? And I said, it's not an either or, it's an and, right? Because each of these individually have some impact and power, but we would not be able to have the same impact and power with leveraging these technologies if they weren't being integrated in some way. And I mentioned a couple of those, the ability to reduce the barriers to entry, right? When you think about, needing to have technical capabilities, those barriers to entry are reducing because of the power of AI. The accessibility and costs of accessing and building a technological infrastructure around extended reality, those costs have come way down. We were able to get our feet underneath us and build some infrastructure because we were able to partner with a grant program that Meta was funding that allowed us access to equipment and allowed us access to grant funding to actually build our digital twin, right? So those were some things that allowed us to get our feet underneath us. But this isn't, again, like I said, this isn't an either or, this is an and they can both, again, add power individually, but together they have the potential to create some really unique experiences for our students. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about some of the teaching capacity it will afford us as well. But we're using it in this leader development space, but we're using it in a lot of other areas as well. Pat?
John, are you going to talk about the simulation, the role play?
Yep.
We're leveraging VR.
Yep, absolutely. So I've referenced it a couple of times. So it would be officially, I think, Pat, a year ago in November. So we're coming up on a year since we started this project. Came together to talk about, okay, how Pat had already had an idea, hey, I really think there's some potential here in the role of VR, virtual reality. And you'll hear me reference the term extended reality just in a very broad sense, because there are sort of 3 lanes to this technology if you're unfamiliar. So virtual reality is one. Think about that as a fully immersive computer-generated environment, right? This is the common gaming space that a lot of our younger people or gamers have had experience with. There's mixed reality, right? Where we are also layering digital assets in headset, but over a real-time environment, right? So if I were sitting in this conference room right now, mixed reality would be maybe projecting Pat in front of me, right? As more of a holographic image. And then we have augmented reality. And this is something we're seeing pop up in the retail space. So if you take your phone, right, and display a chair that you're looking at on Wayfair into your space to see how it looks, that's more of an augmented reality application. Right now, most of the work that the spaces we're playing in are in that virtual reality, mixed reality environment. But by the time this year ends, we will hit that augmented reality as well. So the leader development project that we pursued with the Allegacy Center was to create an experience for students to engage in feedback processes. And in this particular setting, It's a scenario where a peer is not meeting their deadlines, their responsibilities as a part of a team. And so what we've done is create a simulation where students can actually go in and through a voice-activated simulative experience, work on giving that feedback. And so the model that Pat is teaching is the behavior impact change model, which is something that is embedded here in our experiences. And the goal is for the user, the player, and speaking with the avatar Taylor, who you're going to get introduced here in a moment, to guide them from understanding the situation and what's happening in their behavior all the way through to a solution, right? And how am I going to actually change the outcome, right? What am I going to do going forward to meet those obligations and play that role effectively within my team? And so that's what we have developed. We're in what we've just concluded is version 1.0. So we have a fully functional VR simulation that allows students to practice giving and receiving, giving feedback to a peer who is not meeting their obligations as a part of a team experience. We are going to be pivoting here into a phase 2 to get to a version 2.0, which will allow us to start to ensure that the instructor, Pat, or other instructors who are using the tool to have feedback, right? So we can collect data on users about how they're making their way through. We can create transcripts so students can see how they navigated through the conversation. So that's the next wave of this particular project. It's a very iterative process, right? So it's a process of a lot of testing, giving feedback, reviewing it, testing it. And so myself, Pat, of course, our colleagues at Looking Glass, and then Chris Shelton, who's one of our instructional designers here, a very iterative process. This was a learning process for us, right? And so whether we view going through a development timeline many times over in the future or not is yet to be determined, but it gave us an opportunity to understand what it means to create a custom simulation. And so if we want to go ahead and go forward, we'll share a couple minutes of that.
Yeah, John, just a little bit to amplify on this. The intent behind giving the students an opportunity to rehearse given challenging feedback to a peer is they'll do it in the goggles. They'll take it home in their dorm room and they'll go through the simulation several times. You're building cognitive scripts inside of it, and you're also enhancing their confidence that they can engage in it, and they're learning the process to give feedback. And then we bring it back to the classroom, and then they'll actually engage with people real time and do the role play. So it'll enhance it. And again, once we develop and build this technology out, we can then adapt it to other scenarios, and it will be a lot quicker to adjust. So we'll have a whole bench that they can select from in their goggles and practice that in their room. So the potential for accelerating leader development is huge using this technology. So I'm going to give it to you where John's going to play the leader, or I guess the peer. You're head of the group, and then Taylor's coming in, and she's missed several deadlines. So let's see how this role play plays out.
And Pat, don't hit play just yet. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things. If you could just hit pause real quick.
Got it.
So there are a lot of things that we really work toward. We wanted to ensure as much realism as possible. There are many VR experiences and simulations out there that are point and click, right? So I would have my controllers in my hand and I would toggle over to a button, press it, or even select how I wanted to respond. So we've done a lot of work in exploring what is out there. And we landed in a place where we really wanted to have as much realism as possible. So the process is voice activated. So you'll see a little mic on the screen and that picks up. There is still some processing. So this is one of the things that as time goes along, as AI improves, in the language models that we're using in the background, the platforms are using in the background to help with the conversation pathing will continue to be even more responsive. There's usually a little bit of a delay. We've cut that delay down a little bit, but we had a process where there was a really long delay. And then we said, hey, we want to make it really short and then it was cutting me off in the middle of, so, these things that we ran into in the development process are not uncommon. but we were learning about what it means to build these experiences. To Pat's point about building a framework and then embedding different types of experiences or simulations that students can pursue, we're almost there to having a really good framework. And so where AI comes in here is, so we started from a basic script. Pat had a case and a basic script for how students should navigate through this conversation. But of course, not everyone's, and I'm not perfect either, right? I didn't read from the script. I spoke and navigated in my mind through the framework that I'm supposed to follow, but my language might be different. Well, if you just embed the script, the simulation will die, right? It won't work, especially in a voice active environment. Well, this is where AI comes in. And this isn't a novel thing, right? We've taken our cues from other leaders in the extended reality space to do this. But we're working with a couple of different AI platforms that are being used by game designers to help with providing upper and lower limits on the user or the student player to, within those boundaries, the conversation still progresses forward. Or if I hit a wall with the avatar, or Taylor in this particular example, I have a chance to get the conversation back on the right track without it just stopping and getting stuck. So we had to navigate through some of those things, but it's been an interesting process. And the advent and the role of generative AI and large language models has afforded us that path. So Pat, we can go ahead and go forward here.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, thanks for coming to meet with me today.
Sure, of course. What's this about?
Taylor, over the last couple of weeks, you've missed 2 really important deadlines with the team. And that makes me really frustrated, because then we have to make up for your work.
Look, I've had a lot going on. I didn't think missing a couple of things would be such a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Okay, I can see that, I guess. How does this affect my relationship with the team?
Well, Taylor, we need to figure out a plan so this doesn't happen again.
I'm not sure I follow, so. It sounded like you were getting into the outcome of my recent performance?
Well, Taylor, your relationship with the team, a relationship's about trust, and we need to rebuild that trust, because right now we don't have that.
Trust? Are you saying the team doesn't trust me?
Well, Taylor, we need to figure out a plan so that we can rebuild that trust.
What sort of impact on the team's trust are we talking about?
We would like to make sure that we can work with you going forward.
Okay, I get that. I didn't realize I was causing so much trouble. I guess I've been a bit overwhelmed.
Can you tell me more about why you are overwhelmed?
I appreciate that. I do want to do better. The requirements for organic chemistry are a lot more than I expected. Coupled with playing on a club sport team and a personal relationship, I do not have enough time in the day to meet all requirements. What can I do to fix this?
Maybe you could take a leave of absence from your club sports team?
That sounds fair. I'll make sure to stay on top of things and communicate better. I don't want to let the team down again. Also, I will consider taking a leave of absence from the club sport team. My academic success seems more important to my future than playing sports for fun.
Great, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with me today, Taylor. I look forward to working with you.
Pat, we can go ahead and probably pause that one there.
Yeah, we're paused. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so that was actually an experience. That whole middle piece there around trust was an example of where I actually had gotten away from some of the impact, right? It's supposed to be a little bit cleaner, but the system and the simulation allowed me to work my way back to a place where we could eventually get to a conclusion and a potential set of recommendations. And so when we first started, if that would have happened, it would have just stopped. The simulation would have just gotten stuck. We've got a couple other we can share with you in the future. Pat can send along, or Carrie can send along, of where it shows also. So that there was a resolution. We eventually, that conversation eventually closes out and it goes back to the main home screen automatically. We have a couple others where you can see what a non-resolution looks like, and even like where there's actually some real static back and forth between the user, but we wanted to show you one of it, of course, getting to a resolution. But it's been, without AI, that process all of that language would have had to have a whole bunch of logic trees sitting in the background that would have had been mapped out. And years ago, you would have had probably a lot less opportunity to do true voice activation, and you would have been looking a lot more like point and click, selecting a path. And so, as Pat and I talked about this over the last year, it's really about building those habits, right? Those cognitive streams in the brain, where it's now I'm actually speaking it, I'm actually acting it out. And now when I come back in, hopefully having built some psychological safety in practicing this, I'm more comfortable in engaging it with a peer. So that's the simulation. Pat, what else would you add?
Yeah, the other major learning point besides the format of delivering challenging conversation would be you don't ever take responsibility for somebody else's problem. And John did a good job on, hey, a recommendation or draw them out, let them solve their own problem, and then offer support so that they have ownership to the problem. And then, like I said, once they've rehearsed this, then we will do the real role play where you got dynamic and they feel more comfortable about it. But it's a great opportunity to rehearse, practice. Instead of just reading the format, they're actually engaged in it. Other uses we use in the School of Business, and you can do it for content creation for AI. If you want to type in Chat GPT, you can kind of outline some case study and some parameters, and it'll generate a case study for you, depending on what you want to teach or what's the main teaching point or points in it. And then role play scenarios. You can also type out, hey, I want to do this. These are the things I want to do. A lot of times what I'll do is if I've got a scenario, I'll type into Chat GPT, it'll spit it out. And what you can do is take that scenario and then add specifics to it to make the role play a little more germane to the context you want to do it. On the case studies and with this, one of the disadvantages is if they're pulling it from the literature is documentation. On where's this case study coming from in different aspects. So you got to be very, very careful if it's using an actual case study and pulling it, that there is some reference to, the intellectual property there. And then again, summary of key leadership teams. The other day, some people had questions on transformational leadership, and instead of asking them to read 36 pages on a chapter of transformational leadership, I just typed into Chat GPT, transformational leadership, advantages, disadvantages, and it spit out like a 1.5 page, really brief summary, hit all the key highlights and everything else. So again, one of the things I want to emphasize on this is AI and VR is a tool. It doesn't take the place. But again, like I said, as far as time, if you need to have your students just get a quick overview of a particular concept, it's a great tool. Instead of 36 pages reading a chapter in a page and a half, they've got the essence of it. Now, the other thing I'd encourage that as far as leaders, you have got to know the content so that you can exercise discretion. I could read that 1.5 page summary and saying, hey, it got major points here. This is the one point that was missing, and I could add that to it. So again, it's a tool. And as educators or as leader developers, you've got to know that. And then the other one is leader development plans. And this could also, if you can teach people again, people are responsible for their own leader development. What I did the other day is typed in that I'm an operational manager, entry level. What would be some of the key things I need to focus on my first year? And it spit out 10 major areas that I need to focus on leader development to prepare to go for the next level. And again, I read through them. It's a great way to kind of do it. Or if you constructed a leader development plan for your people, it's a great way to check it. And again, what you develop the leader development plan are your developmental goals, either for the course or for this position, and then use Chat GPT to have a framework to start with, and then you can refine it. And then the other one I use it for a lot is as a sounding board. Like I said, Sean Han and I are designing a course in strategic leadership. We use the key lesson objectives. We created our content and mapped it all out. Once we were done, I threw it into Chat GPT and asked, where are the gaps or where are the holes? And they were able to come up with 2 other areas where we could consider potentially adding to the course. So it was just kind of a sound check or a check on it. The other one is exploring key topics in leadership for lessons. I'll type in kind of this is what the lesson's on. These are the learning objectives. And now I'm looking at what are some of the key content main points for it. And it allows you to kind of check what you mapped out with what Chat GPT sees and see if there's any gaps or any holes. So again, I'm using it as a tool for it. And then the other one is new topics. If I'm asked to present or comment on a new topic, I type that into Chat GPT in a matter of seconds. I've got 2-3 pages on that topic, and I could get spun up really quickly on it. And then I can go to the research into the literature and get deeper. But at least I have an area where I need to start and what are the key areas. And then the other one is leader development challenges. I'm always looking at, hey, and I'm getting ready to update my leadership course for the spring. What are some of the current trends in leader development challenges that leaders are facing? Typed in Chat GPT, came up with 10 areas that leaders are currently facing or the challenges they have. So again, as I'm updating my course, I can include them in. Also, the discernment piece. I do exec ed and consulting, and these majority of them that were mentioned were the ones that the current leaders are wrestling with. So again, I understand that these are legit. And I talked about, you can check the robustness of a leader development program. But again, it's a way to just kind of check your work, and it's a tool. So what I'm asked to do is let's take a few minutes. I would love to hear what other people, their ideas or what they're using in their organization. Is any thoughts, anything that you all currently use to leverage VR or AI in your organizations, or ideas? What haven't we thought about?
Hi, this is Parul from, I'm an alum of 08. I think you can hear me.
That's a lot of fun.
Thank you. I think what it was very interesting, by the way. Thank you for all the information you've shared. It actually gets you thinking on different ways of leveraging VR and AI. I recently ran into an experience with a colleague at another company, which I thought was very interesting. What they've done with the AI is for the full customer service section. It's a huge company. I won't share the name of the company as they're still in the works for it. But for their customer service, they've taken all the past conversations that their customer representatives have had, putting it into an AI mode, and now they've built their own internal confidential, because again, this is all company related data, right? A whole AI database of any and all responses that customer reps can put in, and it will trot out all the right questions rather than going to the next manager level or the next manager level. And it was very interesting how much they're saying that's improved the customer service experience, but also from the discussion you just shared, from a leadership point of view and the challenges we see at the mid-level manager training levels. It would be very interesting, and I actually don't know if anyone does that or haven't heard of it, but like manager training purposes and having the VR with AI and going through situational experiences where you practice and get to know, I could totally see that. But I was curious if you know anyone doing that as well, because it would be really helpful.
Yeah, personally, I don't know anybody. I know similar companies are putting in like comments like pulse reports that the employees give. They put it into AI, very similar, and then they run and they look at what are the themes and the pulse report at different levels. They can sit there and see, these are the strengths, or more importantly, these are the challenges that are being faced by leaders at each level. Then they can adjust the leader development program to address those challenges at the levels. So they have insights. But I love the idea on customer service and then to be able to generate questions. But more importantly, can you imagine running simulations for an extremely difficult customer on the initial training on how to respond and de-escalate? And so, I mean, what a great idea.
Parul, thank you so much for bringing that up. I love the example of how they really customized it to their own environment. The example you provide is one of the ways with which we are seeing some real adoption in corporate training and development. Is in, we can put any label we want on it. Soft skills, hard skills, power skills. It's these human-centric skills, right? And how we collaborate, communicate, connect to move things forward, negotiation. Those are some areas that we actually do have a little bit more access to potential, what we refer to as more off-the-shelf applications. I think the opportunity here and why this was a perfect opportunity for us that we gave today around leader development to learn about a development process was because also the model that we really were looking to employ was something that really is connected to our curriculum. And so they're wanted to make sure that the simulation itself was specific to that. But no, you're 100% right. And that's definitely, there was an article, Pat, you and I were talking about this. There was an article last week in the Wall Street Journal about where specifically it was reinforcing over the last couple of years, where specifically some of the use of extended reality, virtual reality has really taken off. And it is definitely in those skill areas in a lot of companies. The example I gave you earlier, that a project that we're working on with Lowe's Foods, when the team was down in Aiken, South Carolina to capture the store, one of their operations managers actually started asking a whole bunch of questions about, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I could really see value in us putting associates into this environment and helping them start to understand like customer experience and delivery. The other piece we took away from it too, and this was Roger Beam and I were demoing a first iteration of the tour. And, this is someone with 30 plus years in consumer packaged goods industry. And he's like, wow, look at how the lighting, look how I can't read that label. He was all of a sudden starting to see things that you wouldn't be able to see unless you truly spent time in the store from a planning perspective, that now all of a sudden you could extend to entire teams, right?
Yes.
So there are some really cool industry examples that we could definitely bring our students. And I love that example of mining the customer data. It's terrific.
Any other thoughts on leveraging it?
I have a, so I'm new to the group. My name's Rob DeBella. I'm a business consultant here in Winston, and I have a client that I'm working with. He's a member of a medical association who has really low engagement and participation. And so he wants to find out why. And his title is Director of Marketing and Engagement, but he has no marketing experience. He's a physician. So he doesn't really know what to do. And so I've talked to him, and as we were talking, I've done a lot of surveys, and I'm thinking, what kind of survey would be helpful? And now I'm thinking with AI, there's some options where I could use AI to provide feedback on different surveys options that then I could provide to him to understand what might be some good paths to retrieve this information. Because the big challenge that we have is if they're not engaged in the association, how engaged are they going to be in completing a survey to understand their engagement in the association? And so I think AI might be of value there to kind of come up with different ways to approach these questions. Or, even to your earlier point, Pat, I'll create a survey and then send it to Pat, to Chat GPT to see if they can provide any of the voids or gaps in it. So I've never used it before. And so this could be a first step into the deep end of the pond, so to speak, for me.
Well, 100%. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is before you design your assessment is type into Chat GPT is what are the causes of low
Okay.
engagement. And that would give you some potential root causes. And then based on that and talking to the client, you could then kind of hone in and then really design the assessment to get at those potential root causes, or at least make sure you have questions for that on that.
No, that's
Yeah,
great
no,
feedback.
that's a great
Thanks.
idea, thinking about how can we use, again, remember, AI is a tool. I hope if any theme comes out of that, AI is a tool. Don't let it think for you. AI is a tool.
Yeah, no, and I think that's going to have to be a learning opportunity for me, is how to use it as a tool, how not to use it as a crutch, but how to enhance what I'm doing. And so, you know, it might be a little risky since I haven't done it before, but I don't think it's too complicated that I can't use it to enhance what I'm doing, and you know, I'll be able to see where the line is before I cross it.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
absolutely.
Thanks.
Rob, I'm happy to, if it would be useful, I'm happy to share some resources with you that might, you know, provide additional, you know, getting started support as well.
Yeah, definitely open to it. And it's interesting you're talking about the retail merchandising experience. My background is in that world, and so I remember the days of actually hand drawing planograms because 100 stores had 100 different planograms, and the stores in the corporate office didn't. They knew it, but they didn't know how to control it. And now with VR, you don't even have to go out to the store; you could get able to manage it. That'd be awesome. You know, I mean, whew, it could be a game changer for companies as big as Walmart and Target and the others.
Yeah, they're doing some stuff that you're referring to. And topic maybe for another day, but that whole 3D visualization,
Oh yeah,
is very much taken root in that space.
yeah.
We're actually giving our students in the MSM program an opportunity to do some digital planogram work, so they can think about planning full stores and planograms individually. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool stuff.
Jeff, you had a comment. I can feel the cognitive energy.
Thanks, Pat. The one thing there is concern on my part. I love the VR and the AI and all the stuff. One of the things in leader development that I think we got to be cognizant of is that we don't get 1,000 miles wide and not in depth in a particular area. And I think about that in leader development, that I'm a voracious reader of books beyond and I think we get into this business too often of PowerPoint presentations of the surface level rather than the more in-depth, and even with leaders, understanding beyond what's just on the surface. And you get that from truly understanding the topic beyond what the highlights are. So I urge us to think about, as you're looking at the VR simulation here, as you develop it more and more, because I love that idea of that creating that interaction, but the more in depth that you can spend, and what I would say a 30-minute or an hour kind of discussion in really going in depth on a particular topic, just to show this is the capability this can really have, you know, to have really long-term impact on that leader situation.
Jeff, you bring up a great point, and it came up yesterday when we were talking to AI fluency in the session here is that we still have to put the foundation in. and what is the knowledge behind what, whatever you're going to use or produce, so they understand what's happening there, and then introduce the tool. And so it's going to be responsible for leaders to build that foundation, make sure they have it, and it's not surface level. And Jeff, we saw that when we moved to digital in the artillery. They lost the ability on gunnery because they relied on the computer. And so again, they went back to teaching the basics. You got to teach the basics. And I think it's going to bring up more engaging with your own leaders, and your mentors are going to be absolutely critical, and peer coaches, to get that understanding of the depth and everything else, and making sure that we're not overly relying on that tool and there's no substance behind it. And again, leaders, when somebody proposes something that looks like it's been generated through AI, now we have to start asking questions to dig to underneath, and do they have an understanding of the underneath, and then they can effectively apply it. But yeah, 100%. I mean, that was kind of the essence of that conversation. That is the greatest thing that we have as educators is, people will get lazy and let AI think for them. And we lose that discretion as leaders to be able to exercise that and understand when, there's a gap in AI, and, and be able to identify it.
I'll draw, it came up in our dinner table the other night at the business school dinner. And it was this strong belief among folks of business education. I wish I could do it sooner. I wish I could do it sooner. Why do I need to understand what Aristotle said? Why do I need to understand the liberal arts piece of that? And if you look at your strongest leaders, they have that well-rounded kind of knowledge base of things that they can draw from, not just strict numbers, as I will say.
Well, I think that broad-based liberal arts teaches you how to think, and teaches you to think creatively, and that broad base also allows you to pivot and adjust. And that's why, again, in our leader development programs, we've got to have the broad base and the depth. And the more you have that, the more you can, I think, effectively and ethically deploy AI as a tool.
Exactly.
And that brings us to that, the final point, and like I said, HR is using it and everything else, but it's the ethics behind it. I mean, right now, HR is running where they're taking all the performance evaluations, running it through, and they're going to start to identify who are the high potentials for the entry level class, so that they can start, developing them in different aspects. So, again, what are the ethics behind that? And is AI going to start driving people on, production lines in different aspects? And so, how do we maintain the humanness to where it is a tool and not a driver of people? And what are some of the ethical considerations of using AI in the business world? And that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just quickly, I think if you tell people in a corporation that their evaluation was done by AI, you're gonna have a huge problem, and it could backfire quickly, and spread. I mean, just that's would be a horrible thing to think. The people would have to be judged by something that comes out of a computer box and not based on other criteria. So
I think we already do that with ATS systems and stuff, just at a different process of where that happens. I mean, I think there's pros and cons to all systems, and AI is the same. It's nothing different than it ever was. It's not going to change moving forward. I think any new innovation or technology, there's both sides of it. It's not a reason not to use AI, but figuring out how it can help you for the long term, and then try and example it for everybody else. But I don't know. I don't know when we've ever stopped things from being negative. And it's the same as, to me, it's the same thing as an ATS system. That's what it is. It scores out and bolts out, and It already exists, so now they're just making it more efficient. But I agree, there should be a human interaction and intervention and figuring out what are those right spots. When does that happen? I think that's the key. We're never going to stop it, but how do you put in a human element to make sure we're making the most out of it?
Wow, great way to bring that up there is that AI is here. And now we need to embrace it, explore the possibilities, but at the same time put guardrails or guidelines up. And as number one, leaders should be sitting down periodically with their people, giving them feedback. Now, if they're using AI to help bring in the feedback, it should be developmental, but they also will have some understanding behind it, not at the end of the thing, a robot hands you your evaluation and your career is based on that. Remember, we're humans, we lead humans, okay? And we use machines as tools to help us lead. And that's why I think it's important for organizations to set those ethical guidelines so that AI augments their culture and doesn't destroy it. And again, the human element in the periodic feedback reports, and somebody's got to make sense out of it. If it spits out and says Sweeney's a high potential, there's got to be a human that's going to go in there and say, what are those things? He may be great at his job, but he's terrible when he interacts with people. Maybe those are the things that, we're having that conversation. Any other thoughts on the ethics? I mean, that's what a great summary. That was super. Thank you.
I'll just offer one comment.
Go ahead.
So UNESCO just released two really thoughtful frameworks, one for educators and one that's intended really around students and how we bring it into teaching and learning. So if you're interested, they're pretty thick reads, but there's some really good guidance around integrating it into an educational environment and what our students need to know. But at the center of all of it, it won't take you but a couple of pages to realize at the center of all of the thinking it's human-centered, right? And so in our AI Fluency series, we read the book Co-Intelligence as a book to kind of frame some of the learning, and it was really helpful. And I was at a conference in the spring, and then that he always is inviting AI to the process, right? And invite AI to the process or to the work. And it's a slight juxtaposition, but I would say instead of bringing humans in, right, we bring AI in, right? And the human stays at the center of everything that we're doing. To everything, Pat, you've been saying about AI as a tool, right? Machines as a resource more than just in control. But I really liked those frameworks, sitting in the seat that I sit in an educational institution, and just a reminder about any frameworks or guidance we use, the human stays very, very much the center of that work.
And I think the other powerful thing about AI is you can do personal leader development plans where I can pick topics where, I need to work on, or I'm excited about, or maybe I want to explore. And I can, and again, if you have it built in, I can pull in modules to really give people to take charge of their development, get them excited about it. And again, can you imagine you have the greatest thought leaders on supply chain management as avatars giving you a session on how to, set up, or efficiently run your supply chain, or whatever it is. We could have the best in the world coming in, but they now have charge of it. They can get excited about it. So, I mean, the ability as far as accelerating leader development is absolutely phenomenal. And, again, are we using it as a tool? That is the key. Go ahead, ma'am.
It's also a challenge of how to know what is right or wrong. I think you referenced that earlier because you know the topics involved in the development course. You were able to figure out what's missing, or at least judge it for yourself, right? But I think the challenge in the example you've just given, if I'm even looking for reference point, how do I know, okay, these are the right elements, or I should trust this to go digging? And then you do end up spending a lot of time to research, but if you just run with it, there's a high chance you're going to fail at it. But how do you figure out, and then how are you trusting the system? I think that's also the way of using AI and learning that. And it's important to figure that out. I don't have it fully resolved for myself yet, but it's just something that I always want. It's like you read it and you know it kind of sounds right, but like how much? And then how do you go digging and to make sure you're getting the right references out of it or the right links and resources to go look up further.
Great point. And I always say leader development is a team sport. I'd find some experts. If I don't fully have it, I would bounce off, hey, this is what it is. This is, thoughts and tap into it in different aspects. But again, a human is checking what the machine is generating. And it gets back to Jeff's point. You've got to build that foundation. We can't take shortcuts on leader development. We've got to lay the foundation so that people can exercise discernment. And I think the other thing is important is people have got to acknowledge if this is AI generated or not. And if it is, then as a senior leader, I want to dig a little bit deeper to make sure. Again, it's a great tool, but I want to do it. So somebody's not passing off work as, this is my own thoughts and work where, all I did was type into Chat GPT.
In academia though, like you wrote articles, you always referenced where and how you got the information, right? There's the
Absolutely.
Is that a part of AI too? Do people actually refer? I haven't seen it. I'm out of this world for a bit now, but I'm curious, like, is that something as students do, if they got something from AI, do you reference it and say this is AI generated?
Yes, they have to. If they're going to generate and put it part of the paper as part of the honor code, you've got to say that this was produced by AI. So
would you think that in a leadership environment outside of academia context, people would actually own up to do that as well? When does that become normal, right?
Well, and that's the question I'd ask is, and you can set it up as a norm. If you're doing a presentation, part of the reference is going to be, if it's AI generated, it's got to be referenced. Because what you're saying is I may think, well, Sweeney, that was a great presentation. You get promoted. All that is Sweeney's a great driver of AI. He doesn't necessarily have the knowledge behind to back it up and think on his own. So that's what I'm saying is as organizations have got to set guidelines. We want to use it. We want to encourage the use, but how do we make sure it's done ethically? And again, the other thing is, if I'm using somebody else's work, how do I acknowledge that? Those are great points, because if somebody presents something that's AI, I'm going to want to dig a little bit deeper to make sure that the substance is there. Yes. Great questions. I love thinking and talking about this. This is so exciting, but I know we're at that time, and I want to honor your time. So thank you all for sharing your time, and I appreciate the feedback in the response. It just makes us better.